You can just do everything you imagine, but everything that you try does not have an effect. Things remain the same. The despair feels like you are carrying a heavy, invisible weight, and it is exhausting. Many of us cry when we feel despair, but sometimes we cry for so long and so hard that there are no more tears, only numbness, only a sense of being stuck or frozen in place. Some of you looking at me like, well, Pastor, I've never felt despair. Well, let me just ask you this. Have you ever come across someone who's in a state of despair? If you pay close attention, you will notice the people around you who are experiencing despair. Their shoulders are slumped. Their eyes are unfocused. There is silence where there used to be plenty of conversation. Despair sounds like long pauses with deep sighs. People who are experiencing despair will often say, "What's the point? I just feel like giving up." Despair smells like stale air or cold ashes. Something that was once warm and vibrant now feels as though it is drained of life. If we're honest this morning, we will admit that despair is a state of being that we all fall into from time to time. When you lose your job and you're still unemployed or underemployed a few months later, despair darkens your doorsteps. When your doctor gives you a diagnosis that is not good, despair comes knocking on your door. When you lose a loved one who once meant more to you than life itself, despair becomes an unwelcome guest in your home. But I came by Goshen this Easter Sunday morning to let you know that despair doesn't have the last word. In our text, we meet a woman who knows despair intimately. Her name is Mary Magdalene. And on that first Easter Sunday morning, she stood at an empty tomb with a broken heart. But before the day is over, Jesus is going to tell Mary, and he's going to tell us that it's time to get up from your despair. In our text, we learned that Peter and John came to the tomb, that they saw that it was empty, and then they went back home. But take a look at verse 11, a close look at verse 11. It says, Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. The disciples went home, but Mary stayed. She couldn't leave. She was paralyzed with grief. Mary came to the tomb early in the morning while it was still dark. Church, in many ways, the darkness on the outside matched the darkness on the inside that Mary was experiencing. Mary came expecting to find Jesus' body, to anoint it with spices, to perform one last act of love for the man who had changed her life. But when she arrived, the stone was rolled away and Jesus was gone. Can anybody imagine what Mary felt at that moment? Jesus had cast 7 demons out of her. Jesus had given her dignity when society had stripped it away. Jesus had given her purpose when her life had no meaning. Jesus had given her hope when all seemed lost. and now he was dead. And even his body was missing. The scripture says Mary was weeping. That word in the Greek means that she was wailing. As a matter of fact, she was sobbing uncontrollably. To put it in modern day vernacular, she was doing some ugly crying. You know what I'm talking about? The kind of crying where mascara runs all down your face, when snot starts bubbling up just a little bit. The kind of a crying that shakes your whole body. The kind of crying that makes it hard to breathe. The kind of crying that leaves you exhausted and empty. And then in verse 12, something remarkable happens. Mary stoops down and looks into the tomb, and she sees two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying. Now, you would think that seeing angels would snap Mary out of her despair. But watch this. The angel asked her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And Mary can't even process that she's talking to angels. She's so locked in on her grief, so consumed by her despair that she can only focus on her loss. So she says, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't even know where they have laid him." Beloved, let me tell you something. Sometimes our despair is so deep that we can't even see the angels that are all around us. Sometimes our pain is so overwhelming that we miss the miracles that are right in front of our eyes. Sister Stephanie, sometimes we're so focused on what we have lost that we can't even see what God is about to do in our lives. Mary had lost her Lord. She had lost her hope. She had lost her future. And in that moment, she couldn't see past her pain. She was stuck in despair. She was frozen at that tomb. She was unable to move forward. Maybe somebody in here this morning knows exactly how Mary felt. Maybe you've been stuck in your own despair, unable to see past your pain, unable to imagine that things will ever even get better. If that's you this morning, hear me clearly. Don't give up. Don't give in, because the story doesn't end at the tomb. Amen? Look at verse 14. When she had said this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Mary turns around. Maybe she heard a sound. Maybe she sensed the presence of someone else around her. We don't know. But Mary turns around, and there he is. Jesus is standing right there. But Mary doesn't even recognize him. She thinks he's the gardener. Now, some of you might be wondering, how in the world could Mary not recognize Jesus? I mean, after all, this is the man she had followed for 3 years. This is the man whose voice she knew, whose face she had looked upon with love and with gratitude, but grief had blinded her. The despair had clouded her vision. Sometimes when we're in the depths of despair, we can't recognize Jesus even when he's standing right in front of our face. So Jesus asked her the same question that the angels asked her. He says, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" And Mary, still thinking that he's the gardener, says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him so that I may take him away." You know, Sister Ho, this is the part that really gets me. Mary is so desperate that she's actually willing to carry a dead body all by herself just so she can have her Jesus back. But then Jesus speaks. He says just one word. Jesus says, "Mary." He calls her by name, and everything changes. Has Jesus ever called you by your name and everything turned around? Can I get a witness? Have you ever been down, almost level to the ground, and Jesus called your name, and then you had the energy to get up? Have you ever been so disappointed, so dismayed that you just didn't even want to face the next obstacle in your life, but then Jesus called your name and you were ready to get up? When Jesus speaks Mary's name, recognition floods in like light breaking through darkness. The scales falls from her eyes, the fog lifts, and Mary cries out, "Rabboni," which means teacher. She recognizes his voice because Jesus said, "My sheep, when they hear my voice, they'll recognize it, that they'll know my voice, and they will follow me." Somebody. But beloved, I want you to know that in your deepest despair, Jesus knows your name. He's not some kind of distant deity who doesn't know your situation. He's not an impersonal force that doesn't care about your pain. He knows your name, and he sees you, and he calls you by your name. When you're weeping at the tomb of your broken dreams, Jesus knows your name. When you're paralyzed by despair of unemployment, Jesus knows your name. When you're overwhelmed by your doctor's diagnosis, Jesus knows your name. When you're drowning in grief over the loss of one of your loved ones, Jesus knows your name. And when Jesus calls your name, something shifts. The darkness doesn't seem quite so dark anymore. The weight doesn't feel quite so heavy anymore. But because you realize that you're not alone, you're not forgotten, you're not abandoned. The one who conquered death knows your name, and he's standing right there with you. Mary thought Jesus was dead and gone. She thought that all hope was lost. She thought that her despair was permanent. But Jesus shows up and called her by name, and everything changed. And Goshen, don't you know that he will do the same thing for you? You may have come in here feeling like Mary at the tomb this morning. You may have come in weeping. You may have come in feeling hopeless. You may have come in stuck in your despair, but Jesus is calling your name right now. Can't you just hear him calling? He's saying, Annette, it's time to get up. He's saying, Jared, it's time to get up. He's saying, Shannon, it's time to get up. He's saying, Connie, it's time to get up. Now, now watch what happens when Mary recognizes Jesus. Her despair doesn't just lift, it transforms into something powerful. Look at verse 17. Jesus says to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God." Jesus gives Mary a mission. He gives her a purpose. The woman who was paralyzed by grief is now mobilized by grace. The woman who couldn't see past her pain is now given a vision for her purpose. Jesus tells her to go and tell. And verse 18 says, Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." Church, do you understand what just happened? Mary Magdalene, Sister Wendy, Mary Magdalene becomes the first evangelist of the resurrection. The first person to preach the good news that Jesus is alive. It wasn't Peter. It wasn't John. It wasn't Andrew. It sure wasn't Judas. It was Mary, a woman who just moments before was drowning in despair. Her pain, though now, her pain has become her platform. Her mess has become her message. And her test has become her testimony. Goshen, this is what happens when Jesus calls your name and you answer. Your despair doesn't just disappear, it transforms into purpose. God takes what the enemy meant for evil and he turns it around for good. He takes your pain and he gives you a platform to help you help somebody else. He takes your struggle and turns it into a story of his glory. Let me tell you a story. Beloved, today, as you know, today is April 5th. What some of you might not know or may not remember is that on this very day in 1956, a baby boy was born into the despair of slavery. His name was Booker Taliaferro Washington. So Sister Karen, he was born on a plantation in Virginia, born into a system that was designed to keep him down. He was born into circumstances that said that he would never, ever amount to anything. But Booker T. Washington got up. He rose from that despair. Early on, he educated himself until later on he was able to walk miles upon miles to attend school. And then in 1881, he founded what used to be known as Tuskegee Institute, but which is now known as Tuskegee University. Tuskegee has educated thousands of African Americans and given them the tools to overcome not just racism, but also to overcome poverty. Booker T. Washington became an advisor to presidents, became an entrepreneur, and he encouraged others to become entrepreneurs. What looked like a dead end became a doorway to purpose. Church, don't you know that that's what God does? He takes people who are born into despair and he raises them up with purpose. He takes situations that look dead and he resurrects them to a new life. He takes what looks like the end and he turns it into a new beginning. Mary's story didn't end at the tomb, and neither does yours. Booker T. Washington's story didn't end in slavery, and neither does yours. When Jesus calls your name and you answer, he gives you a mission, he gives you a message, and he gives you a purpose that's bigger than your pain. Maybe you've been in despair because you've lost your job, but God is about to give you a new assignment. Maybe you've been in despair because of a health diagnosis, but God is about to give you a testimony that will encourage somebody else. Maybe you've been in despair, but because of a broken relationship. All right, if you're not married, God is about to give you a new relationship. But God is about to use, in any event, your story to help somebody else heal. Your despair is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your testimony. God is calling your name this morning, and he's saying, I have a purpose for you. I have a plan for you. I have a mission for you. It's time to get up from your despair and to walk into your purpose. Oh, thanks be unto God. How many people know that trouble don't last always? We serve a God who's present. We serve a God who's passionate. We serve a God who's powerful, a God who is always with us, always loves us, and always lifts us up from where we are to where he would have us to be. We serve a God who raised his only begotten son from death and the grave. Oh, how many people know that on one bad Friday that became good, Jesus was beaten until he was bloody and hung on the cross. They stretched him high and they stretched him wide. Jesus could have come down from that cross, but he chose to stay up. He chose to stay on that cross, even though he was in agonizing and crucifying pain. He chose to die for me, and he chose to die for you for crimes that he did not commit. He chose to do that because he loves us just that much. When Jesus died on Friday and he was laid to rest in a borrowed tomb, his disciples were in shock. Jesus slept all day Saturday and his disciples were sad. On Sunday morning, despair was beginning to set in, but early Sunday morning, when it was still dark, something happened in that tomb. God the Father looked down at God the Son, and he said, tap, 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 it's time to get up. It's time to get up. It's time to get up. And Jesus got up with all power in his hands. The grave couldn't keep him. Hell couldn't hold him back. Death couldn't stop him. Jesus got up from his despair. And if you, beloved, if you're here this morning and you've been sitting in your despair, you've been drowning in your despair, it's time to get up. Don't let your pain paralyze you. Don't let your sadness keep you stuck. Don't let anybody attack you and raise up your anxiety. Don't get drowned in your disappointment or frozen in your fear. It's time to get up. God bless you, Goshen.